Okay, by now you should have realized that when I type something into the URL here for a PHP file, it goes index.php. Now, what actually is that? So you have an index file here. I'll just make this a little bigger so you can see this easier. We have index.php. What index means is when there are no other files, or even if there are other files, your browser is always going to try to figure out what the first one it should load. So if you have index.php and home.php and homepage.php, which one should be loaded first when there is no index.php file? Now bear with me because this will make sense in just a moment. You notice I've changed the URL here. There's nothing there. Now what this means is because there's nothing there, my server that's running PHP is going to say, the first one I'm looking for is index.php. Does this file exist? If it does, it will show it. And this file, as you can see right up here, is called index.php, and it shows up in here as we would expect. Now I'll save this and refresh just so you can see that I'm not lying. Look, my text showed up just as we thought it would. Now, what do you need to actually serve a PHP file? Well, as you can see, I have no PHP in this file at all. In fact, it's pure HTML. And when I go and view the source, we can see that these are the exact same thing here. I'll make this bigger so you can see this as well. And so this says h1, what is a .php file? And in my Sublime editor, it says the exact same thing. Now, could I have named this index.html? Could I have named this index.css? Yes, absolutely I could have. And would that have changed anything at this point? No, because we're not running any PHP. Now, let's take a look at an example here. Let's type a little bit of PHP. Now, you don't need to understand what this PHP is yet. I'm just showing you that .php in the file name extension is actually really important. So I type echo test, and when I refresh the page, it says test. Perfect. But if I duplicate this page, just bear with me as I duplicate this page, and I'm going to call this one .html. So you can see that my syntax highlighting has already changed. That's because I'm using a plugin in Sublime. Now, if I go to /index.html, nothing shows up here. So I've got this whole PHP echo test, nothing is showing up. Now, if I go and view this source, it will show up. Watch this. Look, there it is. Now, why does it not show up on the front page? Why does test not show up here, but it showed up in the index.php file? And again, I'll just show you as a demonstration that, boom, there it is. It says test. And when I go to the HTML file, it doesn't say anything. But in the source, it's there. Now, the reason for this is because your browser is looking for these opening and closing brackets, these greater than, less than symbols. It's trying to interpret that this is HTML, but it doesn't understand what it is, so it's not showing it, but it's still in the source. Okay, so jumping back to the index.php file, I'm just going to close these down real quick. Go back to the PHP file. Boom, there it is. Now our server, whether you're running XAMPP, MAMP, Docker, whatever is running PHP on your computer right now is looking for that .php file extension. Without it, it doesn't run. It just renders as regular HTML. Now, when we look at the source of this PHP file, we don't see this PHP echo, this closing syntax. Again, don't worry about what that is. We don't see any of that. All we see is test. Now, this is part of the power behind PHP. When you write PHP inside of an HTML file, we call this a template. It doesn't show your PHP code at all. In fact, it's only going to show what it's supposed to show. And that hides what's called your source code. So people can't just open up your website and steal your code because they don't know what is running in here. They don't know if it's checking to see if someone is signed in or logged out, or if they have a certain permission, or if they're allowed to do something or not allowed to do something, or if they have a certain gender, or if they're older than 18, or any sort of website verification. They don't know that in the code because your source code is hidden with this beautiful PHP tag. So essentially, this is what a PHP file is. Don't sweat it too much. You're going to get used to all of this. Again, if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, just bear with me. Once we actually start digging into this and start typing our own HTML, not HTML, rather, I mean PHP, sorry about that one. Once we start writing our own PHP, this is going to make a lot more sense to you, I promise. But for now, what you need to know is that every time you write a PHP file, it needs to end in .php, not .txt, not .html, not .abc, not .123, not .css, not .js. Every file, and let me write this down, every file must end in .php. That extension is incredibly important. That's how Apache, which is like the middleman on your server, it's the one that reads the PHP files and says, oh, okay, I'm going to read what this is, and I'm only going to actually help you display the word test. So Apache, and again, we'll talk about Apache much down the road. You don't need to know too much about that. But Apache is the guy that says, oh, you're a PHP file? Guess what? I know how to handle this. This is PHP. This is what I do. This is my thing. I'm only going to show you the PHP. I'm not going to render this like HTML like I normally would. I'm going to render this like PHP because that's what this file is. So that is the long-winded explanation of what a PHP file essentially is. So just remember, if you're going to take one thing away from this lesson, that all your PHP files need to end in .php.